we're we're very, very lucky to be able to have people like him who can talk to you directly and help you with some new ideas and maybe give you a fresh perspective on things. So if anyone
But
has a question, you can type it into the chat or raise your hand and I'll call on you. Yes, Avi?
I just thought I didn't realize, Renan, that you had more of a background in jazz, and I believe what's written in your kind of bio is when you were younger. And I was just wondering if you could talk about what that was like a little bit, and also sort of the transition towards some of the more solo music that you play.
Yeah, absolutely. I, my background is like this. Well, first of all, it's a pleasure to be spending some time with all of you. I have so much respect and admiration for what the Primavera Fund is all about, and I've had the pleasure of working with some students privately over the last few years, which is hard to believe, through the organization, and given a couple of real life master classes. And this is my first sort of cyber master class that I've ever done. So I was happy to be broken in by all of you guys. So thank you for that opportunity. And I just want to say, any organization that is giving everybody full scholarship to be able to better themselves in any way, especially when it's for good reasons, which it is here. It really hits home and means so much to me. So I just want to thank you guys for that. With regard to my background and my upbringing, I started music when I was 4. I started playing on the piano, and my mom said right away, because she was my teacher, that she didn't know what to do with me because she was a classically trained pianist, but I was almost immediately writing songs, sort of like Billy Joel. I would write my own words and my own chords, and she kept on saying, "Practice your Mozart." And I was sort of always drawn towards just doing my own thing on the instrument naturally. But she kept me disciplined by, teaching me scales and arpeggios, and getting me on some of the core sort of kiddie repertoire and bringing me up through the ranks. But I was a huge quitter. My attention span was terrible. It was kind of like that movie Up. If the dog who stars in Up, every time the dog sees a squirrel, it's a squirrel, and is just distracted. That was more or less me. And um, I would quit. I would say, "Mom, I don't want to play the piano anymore." And then a couple of weeks later, I would kind of come crawling back to her, asking her if I learn from her again. And she always accepted me back, I think, because she was my mother and she had to. Um, when I was 9, I got introduced to the cello, and I played the cello for about 3 months, and then I quit the cello. And my mom told me to go to my cello teacher and look her in the eyes, and because she said, if you're going to quit from somebody that's not your mother, there's a little more respect that goes into the game, and you have to kind of, you know, adult up and go over to that teacher and tell that person that you're not going to be continuing working with that teacher, and you appreciated what you've taken away. And there's sort of an elegant transition that goes into that. So I was taught that at a very young age, but I was so nervous as a 9-year-old to do this. But I spent the time. I went up to my cello teacher. I looked her in the eyes and I said, "Mrs. Radnick, I'm not going to play the cello anymore. I quit." And she started to cry. And it was devastating. As a 9-year-old, it left a mark. And I didn't understand why she was crying. It felt, I never wanted to tell a teacher ever again that I wasn't going to work with them. Very traumatic experience. But I came home. My mom said maybe she was crying because she thinks you're talented and she wants to work with you. And I said, no, 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 that's not the reason. Um, I, but my mom was pretty sure it was. Anyhow, when I was 11, I got really into musical theater. And for a couple of years, I started to get like these starring roles in community theater. And I just loved being the center of attention, no matter what it was. I was very drawn to the stage. And I wanted people to appreciate for what I was doing on the stage. But after getting a couple of starring roles, when I was 13, I had that very cruel joke that Mother Nature plays on boys when they're going into adulthood. And all of a sudden, I couldn't sing to save my life. And I was immediately not getting roles, or I was in the chorus, and it really left a mark on my ego. So then I was 15, and I was kind of I started playing the bass when I was 11, but I kind of putzed around on the instrument, to be completely honest. My parents practically had to hold the gun to my head to get me to practice. I fought them tooth and nail. I played in the orchestra. I never really understood what I was doing there. I liked the music, but I didn't love it. And then when I was 15, there was this guy that I looked up to who asked me if I would come and join his jazz trio. And I happened to play the bass. So he had me come over to his house, and all I was excited about was the basketball game that I was going to afterwards. I had my like intramural jersey on, and my parents were going to pick me up in an hour. However, this particular day, this pianist, who was very into playing jazz piano, taught me how to play the blues. And he played for me a recording of Thelonious Monk and Ray Brown. And I was pretty much blown away from the second that I heard those two artists. And there was this little doo-wop thing that I used to play on the piano that was kind of like a boom, 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 doo, 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 doo. And he said, just play that on the bass. And I was able to sort of copy and paste, and he was able to jam as I did this on the bass. I kept good time. I played the right notes in the chord, and he jammed and had a field day. And I just, for the first time in my life, with practically anything that I ever did, I was in love. You know, like immediately the bass and making music was just it for me. And I think part of it was just this responsibility that I had to like hold the tempo and supply some sort of a rhythm and chord structure so this other guy could jam. And knowing that I was the impetus, I was the reason for him being able to do all these things on the piano, made me feel really good. And I came home after the basketball game, and I went right to the bass on my own accord, and I practiced on my own accord for the first time on my own. And my parents went grocery shopping, and they came home about an hour and a half later, and I was still practicing. And my parents dropped the groceries on the floor. I remember it because eggs were involved, and it was terrible. And they just didn't know what to do with themselves. They couldn't believe that I actually was finally practicing. You know, after rewind the clock 11 years earlier, 4 years old, they're making me make music, all these different things that happen. 11 years later of just like my parents saying, please just stay, do something in music. Finally, the light bulb's over my head, and that's it. And so jazz, to answer your question, Avi, like jazz was kind of like my gateway. It was the thing that like hook, line, and sinker, it brought me in. And then I had to, at that point, I had to learn everything about jazz that I possibly could. And my parents were really smart, and they hooked me up with this teacher who's still teaching around my area, who's just a tremendous bass player. His name's Douglas Mapp. Some of you may have heard of him. And he called himself, I remember this, I don't know if he still calls him this title, but I remember he said to me, he's a switch hitter. And what he meant by that was he plays, and back in the day, I believe he called it, and I don't want to paraphrase because when you're 15 and then, you know, fast forward to 42, a lot of the recollection, you know, things can kind of go away. But what I remember was he said, you have to play legit music in order to be able to play jazz well. And I've always laughed over that, but that's how he was trained. Classical was legit and jazz was jazz, which that's not what he means. I know it's not what he means, but that's what I kind of took away from it. And I had these kind of like stigmas to what things were. So I compartmentalized everything. Okay, well, classical is legit music and jazz is fun. And that's how I thought of it, you know? Okay, well, I'm going to do this legit thing over here that's really serious in order to take me to something that brings me a lot of joy. I get it. Okay, let me start practicing my classical music. So I started working really hard on any repertoire he gave me. Anyhow, fast forward 6 months later, I was going to audition for my regional orchestra for like a South Jersey, junior high or South Jersey high school orchestra. And we were playing Smetana's Ma Vlast, the Moldau. And we get to this section in the tone poem, and it's called The Rapids. All right. Now, to most of you probably here, and of course the adults, that makes sense. This section is about the rapids. But this dumb kid at the time saw the rapids written in the music, and I had no idea what that meant. And I'm playing it, and then he grabs the bass from me, and he starts to play the rapids. And he's like, look, it's like you're in a river, and like you're boating, and all of a sudden there's this current, and you're going to fall off the boat, and it's just crazy. It's the rapids. And he was playing so well. And I said, oh my gosh, wait a second, Mr. Matt, do you mean to tell me that classical music can like actually make something into a water that has, current, and it's going to flip somebody over the boat, like actually can say something? And he goes, yes, of course. And I needed to be told that. And I realized at that moment, it wasn't about playing jazz or playing classical or whatever it was, but it was about trying to discover the character of the music, what the music is trying to say. It doesn't matter what style it is. And I think that was another aha moment where it was just like blast off. And I just wanted to get my hands on practically every genre of music that I could from that point forward. So extremely long-winded answer to your question. But jazz was pretty much my gateway into everything that is music. And, now I look at music as like in the same way that I like to think of me looking at people, which is that we're all beautiful and we all have our differences and our similarities. And that's kind of what brings us together. So I don't consider music so much as like this genre, this genre. It's more like, okay, this is the history of that genre. But if you fast forward to today, it's just this culmination of like something that's so beautiful, a melting pot of just gorgeous, gorgeous, gorgeous opportunity. So it's kind of how I look at it.
Other questions? Serrano, come on, I know you've got a question. Gabe, I see you there.
People are saying if he's going to be that long, I'm not going to ask a question.
Well, I have a question then if no one else is going to go. What do you do when because we've all the adults here have experienced this, and all the kids here will experience this at some point. What do you do when you fall a little bit out of love with it? How do you bring yourself back?
I've never been out of love with music, so I don't know if I'm the best person to ask that question to. But it reminds me, one time I was, I've had the opportunity now to meet Yo-Yo Ma, a few times throughout the years, and he's definitely an idol of mine. And I remember waiting to say hello to him because my group had played for him, and we got to know him that way. My group's called Time for Three, for those of you who don't know. And we were waiting in line to say hi to Yo-Yo, Mr. Ma. And there was this young lady in front of me with her dad. And he introduced her and said, my daughter's not practicing. Will you please say something to make it so she falls in love with her cello? And Yo-Yo kind of like brushed the dad aside and leaned in, and he said, do you love playing your instrument? And she said, no. and then he said, is there anything about the cello that you enjoy? And she's like, well, there's some pieces that I like, but my teacher doesn't let me play them. And he said, you play whatever you love on that instrument, and that's all that matters. And I'm sure that probably Yo-Yo was forced to do certain things as a cellist, as a young cellist, in order to get the discipline that he has. But what I took away from that, and it stayed with me to this day, is that it's not always about actually not liking something, but sometimes it's about maybe not approaching it in a way that's bringing you joy. And even with my 5-year-old who plays Suzuki piano, there's a lot of discipline that goes into that. And I still feel it's important to approach things musically. And I guess I go back to what I was saying in the video, is that I think it's really important to use music as your lead source, because if you have a goal that's based on something that's not bringing you joy, then that might be a long road. You might find that you actually do love it as you really delve into it. And technique is really, really important. But one of the things that brings me joy in music making is understanding some fundamentals, like what am I trying to say musically? What is the character of the piece? Where am I going with the line? Why is this relevant? Is this lighthearted? Is this sentimental? Is this heavy? Am I supposed to change the world when I play this music, or is it just to kind of make somebody a little happy? These types of questions are important. So, truth of it is that you might, if music may not be for you, like if it doesn't bring you joy, that's okay. That's not like a major problem. But the funny thing about that is I've never, after our gigs, when we do play live, not during COVID-19, but when we do play on the stage, Time for Three has, a lot of times we have meet and greets after the shows, and people wait in line and they want to talk to us. And almost every time that I have the CD signing, an adult comes up to me and says, "Oh, I played the violin until I was 16 and then I quit. And it was the worst decision of my life." And I get that all the time. People just always wish that they would have stuck with it. That's a blanket statement, but I haven't ever come across somebody who says, "I quit the violin when I was 18 and it was the best decision I ever made." That's just never happened. So, I also feel that, I'm a professional musician and I'm fortunate to do what it is that I love so much. But it's okay if I played the bass and I didn't become a professional bassist, and I did something else. Just having that as a tool to be creative. And you know what? I'll segue really quick as a secondary thought. I think being able to be creative in your work, especially now, is, I don't want to say it's crucial, but it definitely can make you a lot happier. You could be miserable at your job and still live a very long life and have other things that make you happy and give you a lot of joy. And you don't have to love what you do, but I have family members that I talk to about this that don't necessarily love their job, but they're able to find things about their work that bring them a lot of joy. And I think that's part of, being creative.
Thank you. Yeah, I agree. I've learned a lot since this shutdown, actually. One of my favorite things about music is there's always something new to learn. So, you never stop growing. Chris, do you have any questions?
Yes.
Okay.
Oh, I was typing the question, but my question was, how did you get exposed to numerous opportunities throughout years playing the bass?
How did I get exposed to numerous opportunities over the years play the bass?
Yes.
Thanks, Chris. Well, I remember a lot of it was like, I have to give my folks a lot of credit because my mom was just always pushing music on me. Um, she's a professional pianist, and she just wanted me to be exposed. So like I remember falling asleep at Philadelphia Orchestra concerts since I was 4, and that's not because you fall asleep at Philadelphia Orchestra concerts. That's just because I was a kid and I was falling asleep. Um, I would literally be she'd be taking me to 10 concerts a year. Um, my dad was big into musical theater, so he was always acting and doing something, even in the morning. Like we'd wake up and I'm all groggy and he's singing Swanee, like just nutty parents. I love them so much. Um, so they gave me a lot of opportunities. When I got into jazz, I do remember a particular story where they were having this tribute to Ron Carter in Harlem. And I live just outside of Philly. And I convinced my parents to let me take off from school and take the bus with that pianist that I was telling you about, Stephen Meyerson, to Harlem to be exposed to all this great bass playing. And everybody was there. I mean, young Christian McBride was there, to even Milt Hinton was still alive. Rufus Reed was there. The list just went on and on. It was like a jazz bass heaven. And I got to sit there for 2 hours and check this show out. And at the end, I've always been a little bit of an audacious personality. I'm not afraid of putting myself out there and telling people I'm into something, or I feel like I might be good at something. I'm a little, so I was precocious, precocious young guy. And I walked right up to Rufus Reed. And Rufus is kind of hard to miss. He's got this amazing, especially back in the day, this huge afro and just like bundle of joy. You just want to go up to him and give him a hug. He's like just an incredible person. And I walked up right to him and I said, "Mr. Reed, I'm Ranaan, and I play bass, and I'd love to take a lesson with you." And he asked me a couple of questions, and then at the end, and I know this is sort of dating myself a little bit, he said, "I'm in the phone book, and I live in Teaneck, New Jersey." And he sort of put the ball in my court. And I went home and I looked him up. He was the only Rufus Reed in Teaneck, New Jersey. And I called him and he called me back. And he gave me this interview over the phone. He could tell that I was serious. And he told me that he gives 2-hour to 4-hour lessons. And he charges $25 an hour. And I said, "I'll take 4 hours." And he said, hold up. Why don't you come? We'll do a 2-hour lesson. We'll see how it goes. So I came up there and drove myself. I was just license friendly. It was an opportunity, I think, for me to put myself on the line and get some information from somebody that was a legend. And I think that I've always been that guy. That's been my personality. So I even remember having the privilege of meeting Wynton Marsalis when I was 15 years old. And I had already started jamming out at a jazz club that's no longer, but it was in Pennsauken, and it was called Serengeti. And I went to Serengeti, and literally the very first time that I went to Serengeti as a 15-year-old bass player, it was the first jazz club I had ever been to. I had the audacity to walk up to the professional bass player and say, "I play jazz bass, can I sit in?" And the bass player said, "Sure." And literally the next set, they called me up and they pronounced my name correctly. They said, "Mr. Ranaan Meyer." It was amazing to me that they got my name right, because nobody does. And said, "We'd like Ranaan to please sit in." And then I got up there and they said, "What do you want to play?" And I swear my heart was like, I was just like, oh God, I could still remember the rush. And I played and it went really well. And I got to sit in again and again and again as the weeks went on. And actually my first professional gig ever was playing jazz bass at Serengeti when I was 16 years old. They paid me under the table. But yeah, I think mainly it was going back to Rachel's question, it was passion and love for what I did. I needed, I needed to be a bassist. There was a point when that 15-year-old experience happened. I just couldn't let anything else happen. And it wasn't about anything other than the fact that I wanted to play the bass professionally. I needed to do it. So I guess, everybody's different, right? We're not all extroverted. Um, there's these spectrums and extremes. Um, I've seen very shy people have amazing careers. And sometimes it's even better than the extroverted people, because their timidness is something that also musicians are attracted to. And so there's not one way, but I guess, Chris, pertaining to me and my life, I've just always been that type of person to throw myself on the fire like that.
Anyone else? Yeah, Patricia.
So I'm not sure if this is a common question for you, but how do you carry your instrument around? Because the bass is a pretty big instrument.
Yeah, for sure. Well, when I'm just like, not on a plane, which right now is a lot, I don't have to carry the instrument at all, except from room to room. But when I like don't have to get on a plane and I'm just going like from car to wherever I'm going, I just have a soft case and a wheel, and the wheel goes in the pinhole, the end pinhole, and it's a really great wheel for the bass world. It's called the Onyx, but there's other wheels that you can get. And when I have to fly, it's something that I've gotten used to. A lot of bass players are sort of that don't do it often, or even that do it often. I've had a lot of conversations with me over the years because it can cause you a lot of stress and angst, and it's like you're putting your baby under the plane and all that stuff. But I basically have this huge trunk. I travel with the David Gage trunk, and it's a really, really reliable trunk. It's carbon fiber. You have to pay extra on most airlines for it to be taken. It's definitely a small fortune when you travel with the instrument. But there's a persona that goes with it, which over the years I've just kind of gotten into a really healthy place with traveling with the instrument. I just show up and I basically try to charm the pants off of everybody that I come in contact with. I'm all smiles when I check the instrument in. I'm talking about the person. I'm really getting to know that person when I'm checking in the bass. I do value the airlines because they make it possible for me to do what it is I love. Every once in a while, I come across somebody who is not so friendly or had a bad day or might be tired. And that's sometimes a tough bridge to cross, especially if they don't know, what to do with the instrument. And that does happen because, it's just an unusual experience when somebody shows up to the airline with a big old instrument. It's really weird. Like usually this is what happens, like they're typing, and I'm approaching and this is the, oh, are you taking that with you? That's literally like a question I get. I'm like, yeah, yes. And I've learned not to be smart about that question. Like, some in the past, like the first year that I was touring a lot, I would say, yeah, why else would I take this to the airport with me? But now I'm just like, yeah, I am going to travel with it. Yeah. And I also have like this rubber band receipts of all my times that I've traveled with the bass. So I usually like very politely say, hey, here's the receipts from my past trips. If that'll help you, they're all on this airline, things like that. So it is crazy. Time for Three has a tour manager now. We're really grateful for that guy because he does so much for us and makes it a lot easier. It's a big instrument.
Yeah, I think that's a really good point. Always be kind to people when you're traveling, the people working there, and always be kind to backstage people. That's how you're going to get people to help you. They deal with a lot every day, and if you just
Absolutely.
ask them to help you nicely, they usually will.
Maybe just be kind to everybody, you
Well,
know?
or yes, that's a good general rule as well.
Man, actually that's a good point, because also on a humanitarian level, like we're all the same because we play music,
Right.
right? Like the same. Hold on, let me think about how I'm saying this. We all carry the emblem if we have an instrument with us. Uh, so we're representing.
Hmm.
So if one of us represents in a way that isn't becoming to all of us, then a stigma is created from, say, like, a society. Uh, so, like, if one bass player shows up and makes a big stink and gets all crazy, then that bass player could make it tough on the next bass player that's coming around. So it's important for us to kind of, think about, regardless of our background, like now we're like in a club called musician. So we have like this extra musician club that we have to consider.
Any last questions? No? Serrano? Gabe? All right. Well, thank you so much. This was so wonderful, and I hope everyone learned something. I certainly did. Um, yeah, this is great. And Renan's going to be doing another class for us in several weeks. That's going to be on improvising. So if you want to know how to get started and you're interested in learning about that, that's a really good one to come back for.
Do any of you guys and gals improvise? Yeah, that's awesome. Joseph, what do you like to improvise on? Like what style of music or styles?
I mean, I just improvise in my high school jazz band. That's about it.
That's cool.
He's good. He's modest. I've seen videos.
Fantastic. And what about you, Patricia?
I mainly just improvise on classical music because I find like there's different types of ways that like a music can go.
Hmm.
I love that. That's great. Yeah, a lot of people like will think I can only improvise if I play jazz, And you can improvise on any style. So that's cool. Well, uh, I'll be talking more about that. I'll save my some of my stuff for that. Well, I just want to leave you all with, if Rachel, is it okay if I so I just want to say that I first of all, it's really nice to have met all of you here, and I realize this is an interesting time um, to do or be anything, but I will say that structurally, uh, I found, after everybody's safe and healthy, and you have to deal with all sort of like these details, right? But like when you get to the music, um, this is an amazing time to kind of get a little lost in the music. Um, my days, I guess, fortunately or unfortunately, go really, really quickly because my whole basement now is a studio, and I come down here usually at 8:30 in the morning until about 4 in the afternoon. I'm just immersing myself in practicing, uh, composing, recording, videoing, looking for new opportunities, working with people, collaborating, and it's pretty rewarding life. So I just want to let you all know that if you are considering a career in music, or even if it just is something that brings you some joy or it is fun, that this is a great time to be doing that. And if music is just kind of like a secondary thing for you, that's also wonderful. And whatever it is that you're passionate about. If you're not already, I encourage you to get lost in it. So thank you guys so much for this wonderful opportunity to spend some time with you.
Thank you. This has been wonderful. Yeah.